In my house, there's a picture on the wall. In my crib, there's a picture on the wall. The prophet sits up on his throne. All the demonstrations. In my rest, there's a picture on the wall. The prophet sits up on his throne. Oh, you smarter than the founder, huh? He didn't demonstrate. Luke T and Abba Lord had to congregate to further the debate, to see if Noble Drew Ali is who we say it is. But let's check the record of the biz. Stepped upon the scene in 1925 in Chicago, all by himself. Less than 4 years multiplied his wealth and economic infrastructure, gave lawless Asiatics some structure, taught young Moorish men to preserve and seed their structure, prepare the scripture and a prayer custom, standing reverently upright. A lot of sheiks are uptight and they tightly wound. I'm like a hound that got the scent of a rabbit. This rabid disrespect of our God, we can't let walk on by. And you come in with all that innovation, puffed up with conceit in your demonstration. The feds is black for this execution. Scimitar. In my house, there's a picture on the wall, and all the prophets sit up on this throne. In my crib, there's a picture on the wall, the prophets sit up on this throne. In my rest, there's a picture on the wall, and the prophets sit up on this throne. In my gaze, there's a picture on the wall, and the prophet sits up on his throne.
Slow. The counter march of the silent soldiers, the Roman hordes couldn't hold us. Dip the Inquisition hidden and read like Moses. The prophet chose us, the holy fire unfroze us. From 33 degrees of a dead plane rose us. Perpendicular, demonstrations gesticular. Standing on my square with that pickaxe hitting you in the temple till you recognize the temple. Look, killer dead status, all that matters, that's simple. The true Amir, the last street Khalif, Sultan City Muhammad III's heir, Abbott's right. Yeah, look, brother, it's quite clear. The prophet brought the truth to us. I spit like this, I can make the whole roof combust. Who but us? Bring a swinging scimitar sharpened. Shook his naughty foe, perm straight like sharpened. They stood idle. New laws is moving by you. If you hating, then you should be demonstrating out the Bible. Stop hating no more.
In my house, there's a picture on the wall, and the prophet sits up on his throne. In my crib, there's a picture on the wall, the prophet sits up on his throne. In my rest, there's a picture on the wall, and the prophet sits up on his throne. In my gaze, there's a picture on the wall, and the prophet sits up on his throne.
Let's get into it. Peace and love. Peace and love. We back, fam. We back. We back one more time. My voice a little bit messed up. I wish we could have went on longer, but you know we had a show scheduled, and I had some things on. I had to get off my chest, and I pretty much got them off. I just want to see us Moors come together and start building, and that's what that show was all about. That show was not even about trying to knock somebody, trying to clown somebody, or throw somebody under the bus. The show is about what are you doing? You know, if I'm working, you should be working too. It's like my mother used to say, if I'm getting up to go to work, I don't care what you do, but you're getting up out this house. So if you say you are in the Moorish world, you should be working, not talking, working. With that being said, we got a show tonight with brother Dr. Rick Kittles. Matter of fact, before we go into, I'm gonna let him introduce himself, but I have my brother on the panel right now, and my brother Ishmael Bay. Brother Ishmael, come in the chat, let the people know who you are and where you from, what you're doing here today.
Peace and blessings, brother Tahaka Bay. How you doing this evening, brother?
Brother, I'm doing wonderful. I wish my voice could hold up like when I was a little younger, but nevertheless, it's all worth it.
Yes, sir, brother Tahaka. Sip a little bit of tea, brother. You be okay. You know what I'm saying? You doing your thing? Well, yes, sir. Brother Ishmael Bay from Syracuse, New York, also via Las Vegas, Nevada. And again, I want to thank you, brother Tahaka Bay, for having such a wonderful platform. You know, there's so many things and so much ground that we cover as Moors, and dealing with the science aspect. I think a very important aspect of what we deal with as Moorish scientists is DNA. You know, it ties us into a lineage. It ties us into a very rich history, and I can think of no one who is better dealing with the African DNA and how it affects us as Africans here in America as Dr. Rick Kittles. I've had the privilege and the honor to be able to meet the brother in order to also hear him lecture, and knowing his work. And I mean, he's just the utmost professional and par excellence in the field. So it's truly an honor to be able to have him come and speak with us and share knowledge and information with us, answer questions that we may have. So I thank you for also offering a platform for Moors to be able to go to get this very, very important knowledge and information, brother. So thank you.
Brother, it's an honor. It's an honor because we know that within the Moorish Science Temple of America, that there's a lot of stones that have been unturned, so to say, meaning that it's not that the information is not there, but people just haven't asked the question. It is.
Absolutely.
And so this
Absolutely.
is one of those situations where we can ask the question, you know, and that's a good thing. And we don't have to go off of conjecture. We don't have to go off theory. We can go off straight what the data say.
Correct.
From there. But with that, I see you got my brother from Team Osiris. Who is that behind that petition right there?
Oh, yeah, that should be Brother Consul.
Hey, peace and love, man. Peace and love, you brother Consul. What's going on, Tahaka? What's going on, Ishmael?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to see you, my brother. Due to the fact that I watch your channel, I keep up with what the keepers up. But I'm glad to have you on there. I'm glad. Brother. Who are you? Tell the Moorish world, who are you? I know who you are. See how excited I get.
Yes, sir, man. Consul Sheshwamu with Team Osiris. You know, longtime friend of the brother Ishmael Bay Allah, and of course, great friend of Tahaka Bay. Shout out to brother Sharif. Shout out to my man Kenyu Bay out here in Chicago. I've been a long time Moor, man, building, and actually I'm glad to see a neo paradigm in the Moorish knowledge, because it's a lot of wrongs that we got to right, man. We got to, you know, get some things right and exact. So I'm really excited, man. This is an honor to even be on your broadcast. So I'm just here to learn and build, man.
Brother, I'm excited too, because as I see what people think, a lot of people think that I'm just a super hyper excited boy, but they don't know that this is by design, that my time was appointed by law to just do what I got to do. And what I'm saying, that ain't no spooky stuff. Then stop, people. There ain't no spooky stuff. What I'm saying is I come right on time by the will of Allah. My passion is where it's at. It has never been this high before in my life, and I'm ready to do the work. And now I have I've seen other people that have been doing the work for years, brother Ishmael, you know, for years. And now we sit amongst each other to do the work together. So that's a blessing. Dr. Kittles, he's going to be calling in for a minute. But Brother Ish, maybe you can give us an outline of exactly what Dr. Kittles is going to present to us today. One of my questions is what the title said. Who are the black people according to DNA? That's one of my questions.
I think that's a very good and profound question, brother. You know, I think that's a question that really does have to be answered. You know, we as black people, black is a descriptive term, a social descriptive term. You know, so by being a black, being a social descriptive term, it covers a vast amount of who we are as human beings, because this is a label that's been placed upon us and a descriptive term that's been placed upon us. So under this paradigm of the title of black, you're covering Moors, you're covering the various other ethnicities that makes us up as human beings. So how does that correlate to the DNA scientifically? What makes us who we are, and how do we make this relevant? You know, we may hear things from an oral history. How do we tie that into a literal scientific history? That's the very important part of what Dr. Kittles presents. That's what he represents, and that's what he does as far as his business. That's what he does as far as the company that he's co-founded, AfricanAncestry.com. It's been very beneficial to me in order to find out, how do you find out what these tribal markers are? How can you identify what tribe a person even comes from or derives from, which is a very small part of the overall DNA picture. This is what his expertise is, as well as other aspects of DNA that's going to be so very important to us as a people that I'm sure he'll be able to expound upon far better than I. But him being an expert in this particular field, it's something that we're able to say, man, what makes us up as black people in this DNA? So it's a very good question that you ask on your show. And I think that we have the right person that can give that answer. We also have our own in-house scientist as Ngozi that can break that down also and put it in a way that's palatable and understandable for us also, that we cannot underestimate Brother Ngozi, my teacher.
All right. With that being said, Brother Ngozi, invite yourself in the chat. Brother, bring yourself in the chat. Let the people know who you are, family.
Islam, peace and love to the family. I'm right here. Could you hear me?
My brother, let the people know who you are. Come on, because you're walking into a house of Moors right now. You walking into a house of crazy. But I'm just playing, my brother.
It's all love, brother.
We got plenty of people watching. Many people want to see Dr. Kittles. People want to hear Dr. Kittles. And now you are in the chat. Let the people know who you are.
Well, I'm Brother Jesse Ngozi, also known. My name is Amir Kamara Bey, or Amir Jelani Kamara Bey. I'm a Moor from Chicago, Illinois. I was once part of Amara Squad, the great team of Brother Ishmael Bey. I was part of his Amara Squad. I have a degree in biology, and I'm a big fan of Dr. Rick Kittles. I have a bachelor's in biology. Dr. Rick Kittles is a geneticist. So I come in trying to introduce the science in the sense of teaching how organisms work and how life work and how life developed and how, genes, work and how, chemicals and everything work, from chemicals to just teaching the science of biology or the studies of organisms. And my thing was, when I first came in the conscious community, and Brother Ish, he brought it up, who they are and the different places that we come from, especially understanding these haplogroups, as people say. It doesn't play a major role with our ethnicity of who we are as a people, but it plays a major role with understanding our sex chromosomes and the main lineage of where our people come from, in a sense of your main line. Like if you have a specific marker to tell what direction you came from, it doesn't tell who you are overall autosomally, but it'll tell what's your lineage of where you geographically what geographical location you develop in. So for me, being a Moor, I think it's important for us to talk about our Mandinka ancestors and our Wolof ancestors, and some of us who have. It's a very important role, because the Mandinka and the Wolof played a major important role in the Moorish Empire. There is no specific bloodline to Moors. When you talk about Moor, you're talking about Berbers or the Amazigh population, and you have the Wolof, who were part of the military. If you study the location of what the Moors were, you have Morocco, and under Morocco you have Mauritania, and under Mauritania you have Senegal. And if we understand the history of Mauritania, or the Amazigh, or the Maori population was there, we have to talk about the Proto-Bafar population, or the Saunke, which is a Mandinka population, who had salt and gold trades amongst the Berbers. We gave them gold, they gave us salt. Our Senegalese ancestors and our ancestors from Gambia, who are Mandinka, because the Mandinka Empire stretches. And when we talk about Mali, we're not talking about the just regular Mali today that you see, that little piece of land. When Sunjata Keita formed the Malian Empire, it stretched from Guinea all the way to the Senegambia area, all the way to, you know, Sierra Leone. All that was part of the Mandinka Empire. Under Fulon Kamara, which is my name, Kamara is a Mandinka name. Under Fulon Kamara, which was his right-hand man, they went in and established the Mandinka Empire. So when we talk about the Mandinka, we have to talk about that our Mandinka ancestors made outside of just understanding the Berber trades, because the Berbers are our brothers too. The Berbers are a first brother or a little brother to our clade, because we both split from a specific mark in the Horn of Africa, which is EP2. And as EP2 went into its own directions, one group give rise to the E1B1A, the other group becomes the E1B1B. So, but we're both E1B1. And, you know, a lot of Europeans try to separate it and say, you know, these are different populations of people, because a lot of Europeans is coming up with this E1B1B marker. Albert Einstein had E1B1B, Hitler had E1B1B. And it's showing, again, it's not talking about the ethnicity or the race. It's talking about, you know, this main line. Their sex chromosomes, or the line that makes him man paternally through their Y chromosome, is Y chromosomes that come from out of Africa, a specific place. You know, they mostly have Horner markers, but we can't separate the E1B1s, whether it's E1B1A or E1B1B. So it all plays a role with this Moorish thing. The Moors were primarily an E1B1 population. They were an E1B1 group of people. So whether they were the Berbers with E1B1B, or the Mandinka or Wolof with the EM33 or E1B1A, either way, they were E's, which shows their African lineage.
Islam. With that being said, my brother, I'm trying to share the link right now. I'm trying to share the link right now. But while I'm doing that, I want my brother, Dr. Rick Kittles, brother, and don't hold back. Don't be humble on me. Tell the people who you are, the Moorish World audience, who you are, family. Come on in. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. How's it going, brothers? How's it going?
Brother,
Hear me well?
I'm doing wonderful, and it's an honor. But I would like you to tell the people who you are, where you from, what you do, and what is your qualifications to do what you do and say what you say.
Okay, all right. Well, first, before I get started, I wanted to thank you, you all, in terms of the invitation to participate tonight in this discussion. I was looking forward to it. Always like to talk amongst the, you know, the brothers who are out there always seeking and trying to share the truth. So I just wanted to thank you all for that. My name is Rick Kittles. I have a PhD in biological sciences. I am a geneticist, and I studied biology undergrad in college in Rochester, New York. I actually grew up in Long Island. I was born in Georgia, grew up in Long Island, and went to college undergrad in Rochester, RIT, not far from a lot of the brothers and sisters up there in Syracuse and Buffalo. So I then went to graduate school at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and got my PhD. My major field of study at that time were biological anthropology, human genetics, and molecular evolution. And so I really was excited about studying evolution and human populations. I wanted to actually become a genetic anthropologist, to really study how populations move and migrate, what are the consequences of that. And I think probably what got me excited when I was in college, grad school, was a big paper that came out on the mitochondrial Eve. That was a big study that came out of UC Berkeley, where they actually looked and zeroed in and traced the mitochondrial DNA of all humans back to Africa. That was a big study, and it was something that was instrumental in terms of me saying, well, damn, I could do this too. I could really explore African history by exploring DNA and leveraging genetic variation. So I was studying genetics, and at the time, this is like the early 90s. I was studying genetics. I was studying skeletal biology. Actually was working with folks at the Smithsonian Museum, Natural History in Washington, D.C. So, in terms of formal training, I had a lot of interesting formal training. But I think the best experiences that I've had, though, was when I was working with folks who ended up mentoring me in the D.C. area. Folks like Dr. Shamarka Keita, who is an anthropologist and was trained at Oxford and works at Howard University now. And also Dr. Fatima Jackson, who was a big supporter of me when I was in school and really helped keep me focused. And I really admired her and Shamarka, folks at Howard University like Dr. Georgia Dunstan, and also Dr. Michael Blinky, who was the chair of anthropology at the time. Now, some of you may remember the New York African Burial Ground Project. Now, at that time, when those bones were found, that burial ground, the African American community in New York really wanted that cemetery to be respected, and they wanted to stop the building of that federal building, and so they ended up getting a lot of political pressure, building a lot of political pressure on the politicians, and they were able to get Howard University's Department of Anthropology involved in getting the remains and studying them. And that was a major, major feat. It was a major study. And when I finished my PhD, right at the point when I was finishing my PhD, I was actively involved in that project, working with Dr. Blakey and Dr. Jackson and Dr. Keita. And I was excited because what I was learning in graduate school allowed me to leverage and understand and use that information to understand better African genetic variation and how we came to be as African Americans here, which was a very unique experience. I don't think there's any other community, any other population from any place in the world that's had a history like us. When we think about the original history of blacks in Africa, people in modern humans evolving in Africa, and then moving out, and then even before folks were moving out of the eastern Horn of Africa into Asia and Europe, there were folks that were moving around within Africa. Africa is a very diverse geographic, ecological continent, but also culturally too. And when we look at the variation, the cultural variation and the biological variation, one of the things that it says is that there was a very long time that these individuals have been on that continent. So much so that they were able to move about. And once you start moving, genetic changes occur in populations, language changes, cultural changes. And so we have an enormous diversity. You think about the 5 major language families in the world, and 5 of them are in Africa. We think about the amount of genetic variation that's just within Africa. There is no other continent or a group of people who have even a minuscule amount of variation that we see in African people. And so that's what I've been working on since I got my PhD, really trying to study and understand African people in the African diaspora, because that genetic variation impacts not only our family history and understanding identity, but also health. And that's what really gets me excited when I start looking at how genes are transmitted in families and how also disease and health behavior is transmitted in families. So as I started, I'm excited to talk with you guys and share some ideas and answer some questions. But yeah, I have had a very blessed life in the sense that I'm doing exactly what I always wanted to do, and I get up in the morning and do exactly what I want to do, which is study Black folks. I love Black people. I think that we have as I said, a unique history and some experiences that are that folks really need to understand. Our narratives, our stories, not just here in the U.S., but in the Caribbean and in other places in Africa. Those stories need to be told because we are very resilient, strong, productive people. And so often, we get hit with the negatives, but we're still around. We're still here.
Absolutely. With that being said, let's just keep it moving. I'll let my brother Ishmael Bey begin to take it away, or he can pass it to somebody with him. And let's just keep it moving. Let's get Dr. Kittles. Let's get him rolling for us, brother. Let's get some questions out there. Brother Ishmael Bey, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. Can you hear me okay, brother?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
Yes, sir. With Dr. Kittles, and I hope that you're able to get some good questions from the forum also. But with Dr. Kittles, I think that one of the things that is so valuable that you actually focus on are also things that affect us as far as health. You know, the unique things that maybe that would affect us as a people, either because we live here in America, or the foods that we intake, or just our genetic makeup. What are some of the things that you find as far as health-wise that are challenging, or some things that you can identify genetically that can be part of the healing process, or things that we can improve upon, brother?
Right. Well, let me get started. Let me first say that, you know, we think about the health of Black folks. A lot of times, you know, it's looked upon as negative. You know, when we think about health disparities, those are diseases that disproportionately impact one population over another. And so there are many health disparities that impact African Americans and Hispanic Americans and Native Americans more so than European Americans. Those disparities, some folks believe have a very strong genetic component to them, and which is the reason why we see the differences in incidence of the disease and mortality. That means how you know, the folks that die, the numbers that die from the disease. But the truth is this: the bulk of health disparities has nothing to do with genetics, with your family history. It has to do more so with your behavior, your income, your education, your health behaviors, diet, lifestyle. So that's you know, they account for the bulk of those health disparities. But there are some, and I studied one in particular, prostate cancer, which disproportionately impacts Black men over all the other groups. Men of African descent, actually men of West and Central African descent, to be specific, are much more at higher risk for prostate cancer than any other group in the world. And we see it not just within certain parts of West and Central Africa, but also in the Caribbean and here in the U.S. The rates are just phenomenal in the sense of comparison to whites and to Asians. So prostate cancer is one of those diseases that there is a strong genetic component that accounts for the differences we see in incidence and mortality across populations. But for instance, like type 2 diabetes, that's all behavior. That's all, you know, that's diet and lifestyle for the most part. There are people who have a family history for type 2 diabetes, and they're obviously all these diseases have a genetic component to it. So let's make that clear. All these diseases do have a genetic component to it. But the reality is the genes do not account for the disparity that we see. So you know, whether you're white, Black, or Asian, you may have some genes that increase your risk for type 2 diabetes. But what's different in terms of the higher incidence in Blacks and Hispanics is our behavior, our dietary and lifestyle behaviors. That's what's driving the big difference. Okay, so do you guys get what I'm saying? So we can't just always lay genes as the culprit. We have to understand that if you exercise, you don't eat as much sugar and soda, and you eat better, your risk will be reduced, even if you have a family history. So those are the things that we have to understand. But then as I said, there are some diseases that have a very strong genetic component to it, and pretty much no matter what you do, you're going to be at higher risk. Prostate cancer, some forms of breast cancer, like triple negative breast cancer, much higher in women of West and Central African descent, and end-stage renal disease. You know, some of these kidney diseases, there appears to be this strong genetic component that may be due to the history of the genetic history of African people. Now, what does that mean? That means that within Africa, you know, before the Maafa, or what we call what's being called the transatlantic slave trade, but the Holocaust, which we call the Maafa, there were pockets of West and Central African communities that were kidnapped and brought to the so-called New World. But the experiences that many of them had on that trek here led to what we call this bottleneck, or this selective sort of pressure that might have increased some of these disease risk alleles, the risk for prostate cancer or some forms of kidney disease and breast cancer. So folks are studying that. Even hypertension, this whole salt sensitivity hypothesis, which I think is really fascinating. Black folk, we love salt, but our body doesn't metabolize it as well as other groups, and so there are many West and Central Africans who are salt sensitive, and so because of that, we end up getting high blood pressure. So those are things that we really need to explore more. The funny thing is when I started in graduate school, there was very little research in African people, and in fact, folks really tried to discourage me from studying African American people. I remember I was trying to get I was working on my dissertation proposal, and I wanted to study. I had a connection in Ethiopia, and I wanted to study the different populations in Ethiopia. I learned all the languages that were spoken and the different groups, the cultures, the geography, and I put it in a proposal, and I had to connect to actually go there and do the research, but my department wouldn't let me because they, didn't feel that it was worthwhile, and they didn't have any control, as much control on it as they wanted to, meaning that they didn't have any professors from their department from the university at the University of Addis Ababa. So I ended up not doing that. I ended up working on the Finnish population. So anybody who understands the Finns in Finland, they're a northern Scandinavian population of Europe. And the funny thing is that they are very different than other European populations. They actually speak a Uralic language, which is an Asian or Asiatic language. It's a Finno-Ugric, which is part of the Uralic language family, while the other Europeans speak Indo-European. So what I did was I looked at the genetics of that country in different provinces and showed the migration of Asian men, Asian Y chromosomes into the Finnish population. And then the women, the mitochondrial DNA reflected women from Europe. And so it was a mixing of women from Europe being grabbed by a few men from Asia. Part of that Mongolian expansion, because we were able to show, looking at genetic Y chromosome polymorphism, that whole migration and movement from Central Asia, Northern Asia, into Estonia, the Eastern European countries, and Finland, and ultimately stopping in Finland. Some may say, well, some may say, well, Godfrey, why weren't you discouraged? Why didn't you just quit when you couldn't do your Ethiopian project for your dissertation? Well, I learned the same tools, the same technique, and sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we have to play that game in order to get what we need to get so we can go back to what we want to do. And that's exactly what I did. I got my PhD, and I said, peace, I'm going to study Black folk. And that I haven't looked back since. But I wanted to tell that story because there's so many of us sometimes, we get so discouraged or so upset thinking that, we don't get to do exactly what we want to do in graduate school, that it's not worth it. It is worth it. Getting those skills and tools and techniques, you can apply them for whatever you want to later. Because it's like a fraternity. They're going to pledge you, they're going to make you great. And so you just have to stay strong.
And I think that's very, very important. You brought up something important when you were just explaining it. You were dealing with the polymorphisms. Can you just take a moment and explain to us how you're actually able to trace the actual tribes? Say someone is from, they take their DNA test and they have a tribe here, and then someone else gets another result back and it's from another tribe. How are you tracing what tribe a person is from so many various African tribes and such a vast amount of land that you're pulling from? How do you make the difference of the tribe?
Right. So there's several ways that we do that. I mean, first off, we have to look at polymorphisms in the DNA. These are changes in the DNA that are informative, that actually allow us to differentiate one group versus another. Okay, that's the first thing that we look at, these informative DNA markers. And then we have to have a pretty comprehensive database that is structured according to the history of those populations. And so as I started developing this African lineage database, I knew that there was a lot of geographic structuring, meaning populations were structured by geographic distance. So the further they lived from each other, the bigger the their genetics. The closer they lived together, then there was more sharing of their DNA, right? And so there was a geographic structuring of my database, but then there was a linguistic structuring, because languages also correlate with geographic distance in many cases. And I gave you an example with the Finns in Finland, where they speak the Uralic language, and their Y chromosomes are completely different than other European Y chromosomes. My training in anthropology and biological anthropology and human genetics really brought together a lot of different skill sets that allowed me to create that database that was specific for African people. Now, I've worked a lot with anthropologists, archaeologists, and geneticists. It wasn't just me. I worked with a team of folks over many different years to develop and identify which populations were going to be important. So some of the data in our database was published by other people, but a lot of it also was collected by my lab, my group, as years went on. When I first started doing it, I started doing it actually back in 1995 because I just really wanted to know what my mitochondrial DNA profile looked like compared to what we had in the published data bases for African people. And I remember at that time there was like 10 Yoruba sequences and like 5 Ethiopian sequences, and my mitochondrial DNA was closer to the Ethiopians than it was to Yoruba for my mother's side now. And I was shocked, because I was like, it can't be. But at the time, that was the resolution that we were able to have. But as time went on and we started getting more populations, we were able to see the real richness and the high resolution of relatedness. So how does this work? So we have in our every cell of our body, we have genetic material that we inherit from our parents, 50% from our mother, 50% on average from our father, which is why we resemble and also can get certain diseases that they may have because of that genetic transmission. Since we have 50% sharing with our parents, we have a similar history. So our parents share 50% of their DNA with their parents. And so my grandparents share 25% of the DNA that I have. You see what I'm saying? Because I have 4 grandparents. 25% of their DNA is in my DNA. So if you look at it, it's like a hierarchy, right? You go from the individual to the parents to the grandparents. And so think about it like the individual and the family. The family is in a community, and the people, those families in those communities are closely related because they have a similar gene pool. They are taking their mates from the same community for the most part. And those communities are structured in regions on continents. And so it's like a hierarchy where we can look at the relatedness through multiple windows. You guys see what I'm saying? We're looking at it through multiple windows of time and geographic space. And the cool thing is, when you see something that doesn't make sense, a lot of times you go to the historical record and you find out that folks have been moving around. You know, folks were breeding horses and was riding horses and trading with groups further away. And when they traded, they brought back women from the other side of the mountain. And so that creates more genetic diversity within that population. You know, genes. I tell my students all the time, genes don't stay in your genes. Anytime you bring 2 people together, 2 groups of people together, there's going to be some mixing. And we can see that in the genetic profile when we look across different populations. The fascinating thing about African Americans is we are such a mixed hodgepodge. We're like mutts. We're like mutts because we share so much. I mean, not share, but we have signatures in our genome from so many different groups. Not just within Africa, which I told you already, Africa has enormous genetic diversity compared to other groups, but also with white, Native Americans, and to some extent Asian population. And there is no monolithic African American either. You look at urban north, rural south, east, southeast, southwest, very different history in Mississippi compared to, let's say, Atlanta, Georgia, or Gainesville, Florida. And so we have to take that into account. Don't think that just because you're black that everything is the same. We have different biological history, even within the United States, but also cultural history, which shape our behavior and our lifestyle. Imagine growing up in Alabama, imagine growing up in Alabama, one of these small towns in Alabama, during the time where the KKK was harassing black communities, and folks were really stressed all the time because they didn't know, they weren't able to really fight what many of these folks were doing to them. Imagine the amount of stress, how that would impact your immune system, how that would impact your biological processes, and also mental health, right? But then think about black folks being raised in Seattle, Washington, where it's just a bit different. You see more black and white holding hands and having babies. We see it in the genetics, right? But imagine growing up in a different area. So we have to take into account these local experiences. That's what I'm trying to make. And the cool thing is, a lot of times those experiences are seen in the DNA.
I find that part of it definitely fascinating, because you're right. If you go to Louisiana, where there's a lot more of the Creole and a lot more of the mixing with the French, etc., that vibration may be different. Just a little bit to the north of it might be in Alabama, but that might be a whole different type of a mixture, because one was dealing with the French down in the Louisiana area. The other ones may have been dealing with a lot of the less mixture, because the French weren't in that particular region. So they may be differently genetically, although they're in the same general area of the Gulf. So I do find that very much fascinating. When we're talking about the different tribes, now we've talked about how you identify the different tribes through the polymorphism of how you trace them in the African tribes. Are you able to do that with the Native American side? The reason why I ask you this is because we deal with a lot of, our body of knowledge are Moorish Americans. So as Moorish Americans, we deal with a lot of aspects of the Moors that are dealing with indigenous populations. And many of us as African people, we have parts of the indigenous population of America here within us. I believe that you have a percentage within you, maybe about 10 to 12%. I have a percentage within me, and many of us, we have that part of it. But are we able to trace tribes here in America the same way that we would be able to trace tribes in Africa? Can you please explain the differences?
Yeah, so the thing about Africa is those populations are so diverse. And as I said, they're geographically structured, culturally structured. So it's easy to sort of identify different profiles and different lineages, different populations. It's much, much harder in Native American populations. And I'll tell you why. There are two reasons. The first reason is Native American populations are a subset of Asian populations. There was really just 4 or 5 major waves of migrations that came into the New World from the I forget the name of that strait, coming out from Asia into North America.
Yeah, the Bering Straits.
Groups, the Bering Straits. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bering Straits. So those groups carry with them a tiny subset of the genetic variation that's in Asia, right? So there's like 4 or 5 major mitochondrial DNA lineages in Native American populations, either A, B, C, or D for the most part, and then X too, right? So when you look at that's a reduction in genetic diversity. So it's much harder to really pinpoint the tribal ancestry with that. However, there's another thing that happened too. There's actually, once the Native Americans came here, they blew up in population size. So they expanded in numbers. But then they died off. They were killed off. And the numbers were striking in terms of the loss of genetic diversity. And we call that genetic drift that occurred during that time too. So there really isn't a lot of diversity there that we can capture to identify those major across different tribal groups. The other reason is that historically Native Americans haven't participated in genetic research. And I don't blame them for the most part, because every time they have, many of the majority scientists have taken advantage of them by sending their DNA to other labs without their knowledge, or publishing stuff that they weren't supposed to be publishing. They'll recruit Native Americans for a type 2 diabetes study, and then study alcoholism or substance abuse, and publish all these papers on these tribes. So there have been actual legal, there's been lawsuits over that, and many of the tribes won, tens of millions of dollars from the university because of that. And so that's part of, that's like our Tuskegee, right? That's why a lot of Black folks say, we don't really want to be involved as guinea pigs in biomedical research because of what happened in Tuskegee. A similar sort of thing, not the same exact, but a similar sort of scenario with Native Americans. And so when these big databases emerged, worldwide databases, there was very little participation with Native Americans. And so we still don't know the real gamut of variation in Native American population. We really don't understand it. We really still don't know. So what many scientists have tried to do is look at Hispanic populations and subtract out the non-white genetic material. Meaning, Hispanics are made up for the most part, depending on, let's say, the central, let's say Mexican Americans, for the most part, Spanish European and Native American ancestry. Some, maybe upwards of 5 to 10% African, but not much. So what they do is they look at those profiles that they know are European because of the richness of the European database, and then what's left, they assign as Native American, which I think is kind of neat at some level, but it's potentially a poor proxy, is that you don't really know if it's truly Native American. The fascinating thing is a lot of it, while it may resemble Asian because that's the ancestral population that Native Americans come from, there's been a lot of change because, they've been here over, in the New World over 12 to 20,000 years.
So are they heavy genetic variations between, before we get to Brother Charkabay, my apologies, brother.
So my brother, go ahead.
Is there a big genetic variation between what you would call the Mexican American and the Puerto Rican American? And what would the variations be between these two, quote unquote, Latino type of populations? Is there a big genetic difference in that?
I love studying Caribbean populations, whether they're African or Hispanic, because they have a lot of African genetic variation there. So, we know Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans have history of the slave trade on those islands. And so we see as West and Central African gene pool embedded in their DNA. We see that, right? But when we look at Mexicans, Guatemalans, and some Central and South American populations, we don't see that the larger proportion of African ancestors, much, much less. Now, there are some parts of South America where there is enormous African ancestors, like in Colombia, right? And the Black Belt and parts of Peru. This is areas where the slave trade, actually, there was one of the stops, and many of the enslaved Africans were brought to Colombia and Brazil, right? So we know that based on the history, but parts of Mexico where there really wasn't this slave trade, and we really don't have any history of Black people in that area, we don't see that in their DNA.
Wow, that's deep. Brother Harker, did you have a question, brother?
Excellent. No, but actually, I want to invite my brief into the chat, brother. Let the people know who you are, brother, because don't nobody really know who you are. So I need you to come in the chat. Let the family know who you are, brother Sharif Bey. Are you there?
Islam, can you hear me?
Islam, yes indeed, yes indeed. How you doing, my brother?
Hey, I'm well. Islam, greetings, peace to the other brothers on the call. Peace, Ish. We were just talking earlier today, man.
Can't hear you, Ish. Your mic off.
Peace to you, brother Sharif. It's always great to hear from you, great king.
Likewise. I want to rise and give praise to Allah, honor His prophet. I want to give honors to everything everyone is giving honors to at the onset of the show. And I'm just listening. I'm learning myself, So I just came in, so you all continue. I got my notepad out.
Yeah. Hey, Doc, can I ask a question right quick on Brother Ish?
Sure, I was going to spring it to you anyway. Let the good doctor know who you are and bring it on in, my brother.
Dr. Rick Kittles, this is Amir.
I can't see you, so let them know who you are and let the people know.
I'm sorry about that. Peace to you, Dr. Rick Kittles. This is Brother Amir Kamara Bey. I'm your friend on the Facebook page. I talked to you a few times in the inbox. How you doing, brother?
Wonderful.
I'm out here in Chicago. And I'm a fan of your work. I follow you, man, and you know, I even asked you questions a few times, and on Facebook a few times. I wanted to ask you a question. It's things going on in the so-called Black community about the ancient Egyptians and our ancestors directly from West Africa. And I would like, you know, if you can, elaborate on it. I would like for you to explain how the Egyptians or the people in Egypt today, paternally, are mostly still indigenous to Africa, and the difference between us and Egyptians, even though we all Africans and we know, you know, the specific marker that Egyptian men have and West African men have, both split from the Horn area. But I would like for you to explain to the people what's the difference between us coming from West Africa and the Egyptian people, and also the linguistic between Afro-Asiatic and the Niger-Congo language family that we come from directly.
Well, Africa, traditionally, historically, we can break Africa up into 4 major pieces, right? West Africa, East Africa, North and South Africa. And then from there, break it up even more based on geography, land masses, climate, ecological zone, and language and culture. One of the things that I think we need to be clear about is that East Africa and West Africa, for a very long time, have been, there's been a lot of migrations back and forth. There's been a lot of trade. Once folks start trading, you get trading not only of salt and sugar and spices, but also sex, you know, and that leads to exchange of genetic material across groups. We know that obviously humanity starting in Africa and some areas of Central East Africa, or East Central Africa, as some say, and then moving out into different parts of Africa. The interesting thing about the West African genetic profiles compared to what we see in East Africa is that East Africa may have had this original sort of old, very generalized sort of profile that actually, when I say generalized, meaning a very old genetic history that then gave rise to a lot of the world, if not most of the world. And so when folks moved into the tropical rainforest in West Africa, Central Africa, there was a lot of changes that occurred in order to survive those ecological zones. Folks got shorter, folks got broad features, broad nose, lips. East Africa is full of what we call the Nilotic type, the long arms, tall, and West Africa much more shorter statured and darker skinned folk. Now a lot of that came as early populations moved across into West Africa and then became isolated, and those languages changed. Now, in terms of particular polymorphism, I don't keep up with all of them because they keep changing. But the bottom line is those East African profiles are quite different. I mean, those West African profiles are quite different than East African. Even so, even some of the Sudanese sub-Saharan, the Sudanese, the Nubian sequences, very different also from West Africa. And a lot of that is structured through history, through time. The languages changed, as time went on, and so did some of those genetic profiles. I hope I answered your question. I mean, we have to understand that there was a continuity at some level between East and West Africa, but it wasn't one where recent Egyptians gave rise to African Americans. You know what I'm saying? Those
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Are a very distinct group that are the ancestral populations for the most part of African Americans.
Brother, let me chop one question. Hold that 1 second. Brother, you just really answered my question. So I kick my feet up now. You answer my question. You know, title of this, yeah, I'm done now. I'm cruising. Because the title of this is Who of the Black People According to DNA, and you just told me they West African. There we go. Come on, my brother. I'm good.
I just want to ask this, Doc. So would it be safe to say, Doc, okay, the Egyptians that live there today, I was looking at studies that said paternally, their Y chromosome is indigenous. A lot of the mitochondrial DNA comes from back migrations, but I know paternally it says that they were indigenous. Not all, but a large portion of them. Would it be safe to say that people were living in West Africa, the pyramid structure of Egypt 4,500 years ago was structured in the sense of our ancestors directly? Yes, we did come from East Africa, as you said, but would it be safe to say that we were in West Africa, you know, doing certain things in certain areas before the pyramid structures or before a so-called Insut or Pharaoh exists in Egypt? You know, would it be safe to say that?
I didn't follow what you're saying. I'm sorry, you fell off. So safe to say what? That there were West Africans during the time the pyramids were being built? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yes, being built. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, those language families go back. I mean, Niger Congo, I mean, it goes back. And so there were folks in West Africa even before that, yeah. I mean, and you know, at the time those pyramids were being built. I remember a lot of those slaves that helped build that came from you know, Sudan and that area. Those were very different than potentially than the modern modern day Egyptians. But you know, you don't have to just use the Y chromosome, brother. You can look at mitochondrial DNA, right? There are some, and this is the funny thing about the majority scientists, because they believe that there was a lot of back migration, and so they will name some of these haplogroups as European or Asian, when in fact they're indigenous to Africa. M1 in particular, okay? The M haplogroup, you know, I don't think anybody says that is an African haplogroup, okay? And the reason why they have so much difficulty in admitting that it's African, I mean, admitting that it's African, is because when they, you know, there's some rules to nomenclature, how they define these lineages. Without M being in Africa, there's just one letter for African mitochondrial DNA variation, the L haplogroup, L. And I think that's astonishing. The L haplogroup has 600 times more genetic variation within that macro haplogroup than any of those haplogroups in any of those 50 haplogroups they got in Europe. It's like they went across the street they went and did a survey across a street in Britain, and then every family they gave them a new haplogroup, even though they pretty much the same. Do you see what I'm saying? But in Africa, we get one haplogroup. So that's politics right there. That's straight politics. That has nothing to do with science. There should be more than just one major haplogroup for mitochondrial DNA in Africa. Think about what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I agree, Doc. And you know what? I want to say this too. Even those small back migrations that you speak of, those people were not Asiatics that you see today. They look different, you know, like the early mitochondrial DNA H1 that came in, or the U6 marker. A lot of those people did not look like the people that live in Europe today, or the so-called Asians today. A lot of them had, you know, they look similar to the people that in Africa. You know, if they came in as early as the early Paleolithic time, you know, as they say today. We already know that.
Right. Many of them were descendants of individuals that just left Africa. That's the way you got to look at it. They didn't go far. They came back.
That's right. Yes, sir.
And so I think this whole U6 thing is interesting too in North Africa, right? And the more, I think there's so much that needs to be done now, looking at the continuity between Northern Africa and Southern Europe, Spain and Italy, and show that, yeah, they were black men in Europe, and these are those lineages, and you know what I'm saying? It's just amazing how we haven't really touched that yet. But there is
that's right.
Opportunities to do that.
Hey, let's pass it around, brother. There's somebody else. Team Osiris, where you at, my brother? Come on in.
Hey, Ngozi is Team Osiris. He the
Yeah,
founder of it.
He pretty much.
We do have representation.
He asked all my questions, bro.
I'm glad the doc going in because it makes sense because SLC 2485 that Europeans have is recent. So I mean that's a recent mutation that they have. So the doc is right. Those people in Europe were definitely black people. They were dark skinned people, but it's politics. They playing games. So I agree with Doc. That's why I follow him. I know it's 100.
So how do we explain the populations of like the Andaman Islands, and the India region, and why they look so African? Are they African or are they not African? Because they have the same exact features as what you would expect in an African population. Are they considered to be African?
One of my early mentors was Dr. Charles Fitch. He was in Morehouse. And he wrote a lot of books on African biological variation and Egypt. He called Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan area, the Horn, and then the area around it in Europe and Asia. He called that the Northeast African extension. You know, Saudi Arabia, all that Middle East area. It wasn't for him. It was called the Northeast African extension. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because he used to always talk about the Andaman Islanders and India and how that continuity may have been due to recent African ancestry. But in fact, though, a lot of that is due to parallel evolution. Meaning, so when the populations from Asia started moving into the tropical areas of Asia, like India. India is like in the tropical belt, 30 degrees north, 30 degrees south of the equator.
Right off that equator, exactly.
That's a lot of environmental pressure. Folks need to have dark skin. And so when you look at the genetics of those populations, they resemble more so Asian populations, but acquired new mutations in order to get those characteristics that were indigenous to Africa. You guys see what I'm saying?
So that goes back to what Dr. Sway-Kieta talked about, polytopicity.
They're not due to African folk who went there and stayed there, but they are part of those migrations that throughout Asia, and they got darker and had physical changes because of the environment.
So Doc, would that be throwback polymorphism, or what Sway-Kieta talked about polytopicity, in the sense of it can go off and on just based off them going into that geographical location? Those genes kind of turn back on because would it be that? Yeah, in a sense. But you got to understand, when we look at, for instance, the pigmentation genes like SLC 2485. That's I was one of those the original group that discovered that gene. We call it the silver locust in the zebrafish, and then we looked at it in humans and found that it was the biggest predictor of skin color between blacks and whites. That variant that is turned on and off between whites and blacks, it's a different variant in Asia. So it's the same gene, it's just a different polymorphism or genetic change. You guys see what I'm saying? So yes, sir.
Indeed. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right. So you get the pressure on the phenotype, and the phenotype is dictated by that gene. And so there was another change in that same gene. It wasn't the same one that was in Africa; it was a different one. And so we've seen that in many different phenotypic or genes that impact physical traits, whether it's height, facial features, skin color, hair texture, hair thickness. There's these variants in these EDAR genes that are exclusive to Asian populations, and they have that unique sort of hair. But you look at individuals in South Africa, some of the Khoi people with certain features, they have the same gene but a different variant. And so, those genes are the same, and they're under different pressures in different geographic regions. And then you will get a different sort of mutation in that gene, the same gene.
So I have a question that's dealing with And the example that's used with the Honorable Marcus Garvey, since we, as Moorish Americans, we honor Marcus Garvey and we hold him in very high regard. When I believe that you did some genetic studies on a family member of Marcus Garvey. Is that correct, Doctor?
Yes, his son. His son is a doctor, I believe. Yep.
All right. So in the findings of that, I believe that the mother genetically was going through like the Balanta tribe, Guinea-Bissau, and the father's tribe was going through like Portugal and Spain. And it's impossible to have a human being here in America with about 250 years to be pure. So we know that genetically with the Moors running Spain for 700 years, that you're not going to have people dwelling in Spain that aren't going to be Moorish after 700 years of ruling. However, what I'm saying is that when you see something genetically on that paternal line that's going through Spain, is that necessarily saying that is European Caucasian? Can we automatically assume that? Or do we just tracing it genetically from that population to Jamaica as far as the father's bloodline? Sometimes when people see that the genetics are saying that 20% Europe, that, you know, socially we automatically say Caucasian. Is that a natural assumption? Is that a good assumption, or is that something that we should not necessarily take on the surface?
That's another great question. I think that given the data, it's a decent assumption. But remember what I said, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done as it relates to Southern Europe and Northern Africa. And so some of these profiles that we see, and we label them European because we found it in a European, so-called European, it may not necessarily be the case. North Africa is just, it's always been a mess because folks, you know, you had the Bedouins, the Beja, you had folks who moved around. There was a lot of these men that had, you know, a crazy amount of children with multiple wives. And so the Y chromosome structure is much different than the mitochondrial DNA structure in Northern Europe. So I think that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done before we can actually say with, you know, 100% sort of confidence that those profiles are specifically Spain or Portugal. Because yeah, that's a good question. There's still, you know, this underlying sort of African component in Southern Africa, Southern Europe, that we just haven't really had a good assessment of.
And you know what? I'm glad the doc just broke that down, and I'm glad you asked that question, Ish, because a lot of those Spaniards or those Mediterranean men, a lot of those individuals have paternal lineages like EM78 or E1B1B, which was also sea hopping from North Africa to Southern Europe for almost 7,000 to 8,000 years, if not longer. So they say that these people can have a certain European marker, like for example, Hitler had a paternal lineage that's indigenous to East Africa, but you know, Albert Einstein had a certain E marker. So they say that it's European, and they really trying to hijack that paternal lineage E3B, because a lot of Europeans, Mediterranean Europeans, and a lot of people in the Middle East have that marker, and they trying to hijack it like it's not indigenous to the continent, and they try to play games. The same thing they did with the E. Yes, sir. What you say, Doc? I'm sorry.
No, I said right. You're right. You're right. I'm agreeing with you. You're absolutely right. No, that's a serious game plan, because you know when you name these, you're giving it an identity. You know, with these profiles, it's becoming sort of these social political constructs. You see what I'm saying? And so that's always, and that's one of the reasons. I'll tell you guys this. You know, I'm glad we're talking about this. That's one of the reasons why when I first started African Ancestry, I didn't even deal with these haplogroups. You know, I started dealing with that later because I knew that they were so corrupt in their explanation of ancestry because of how they were named. And so, you know, as Black folk became more sophisticated with the genetics because other companies emerged, all of a sudden I was getting heat because I wasn't doing haplogroup designation. I wasn't doing it because I didn't feel it was necessary to explain blackness.
That's right.
Oh man, that's a battle on a whole nother level. I mean, that's something that we take for granted today, but that's something that's a barrier that you had to break down that we weren't even privy to. That's deep.
Yeah, and they tried to track you down on 60 Minutes, but you killed them. Like what you said, they tried to undermine you. And you're right. You're absolutely right, and you killed them.
That was funny. That 60 Minutes speech was funny because it was so great. That interview was so good, and then at the end they tried that catch you thing. I had no idea that they had used other companies with that woman, and they had her, crying on tape, and how do you feel about this? I'm like, I feel that you guys really set her up. I mean, companies, those other companies, their database for Africa is a fraction of what I have, and so
that's right.
My results are different from theirs. They need to ask those guys, how come their results are different from mine? I'm the one with the larger database. I'm the one that had African historians and archaeologists and anthropologists working on that database. So I just think, that was funny. I enjoyed it.
Let me say
you know what, Doc, when you give your, I'm sorry, go ahead, brother Tahaka.
Brother, let me tell everybody that's coming in the chat, that's joining in the chat, we here with Dr. Rick Kittles. He is the researcher, founder, but I'm gonna break it down the way that it is written. He's pioneering researcher, the pioneer researcher. Dr. Rick Kittles is co-founder and scientific director of African Ancestry, Inc. It is through his years of research on genetic variations in African peoples, his passion for African history, and the movements of its people throughout the world that African Ancestry was created in 2003. Since then, African Ancestry has made its mark as a pioneering force in ancestry tracing, being the first in the industry to geographically assess African lineages to the present day country of origin. With that being said, family, if y'all watching, I would like y'all to go and check out AfricanAncestry.com. Go there, do your little research on DNA tracing. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Dr. Gina Paige, who is also the co-founder of African Ancestry, Inc., AfricanAncestry.com. Well, we want to see where we're from. The brother already said we are known to be from West Africa. If you are a so-called Negro, Black, colored person in America, you are from West Africa. And the Prophet Noble Drew Ali said the Moors are descendants from the northwest and southwestern shores of Africa. So there it is. Brothers, y'all take it away. I just wanted to give my brother a plug and send people to his page, because this is very important in this day and time when people trying to figure out who they are and where they come from. Take it away.
I also wanted to let it be known right quick. Brother Sharif comes in. Okay. I just want to let it be known that Dr. Rick Kittles is actually being a little humble right now also. He also, I heard, rumor has it, he has a PhD on the wheels of steel. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I heard he's pretty nice on the wheel, and he could keep a party rocking all night long is what I heard. So,
somebody's doing their homework. But yeah, no, I appreciate all the comments, brothers. And, I've always, my mother always humbled me from the very beginning. And never try to be somebody that you're not, don't try to oversell yourself or whatever. So that's sort of that's where I get that from. But I'll tell you, man, I see myself just like each one of you guys, man. And I feel that I've been blessed in so many ways. I try to stay focused, and I'm definitely committed to making sure that Black folk achieve what we should achieve. And that's why I got the PhD. I didn't get a PhD to make $1 million or whatever. I got a PhD because I wanted to contribute to the Black community. And I think I've been holding firm with that. Everything that I do deals with Black people. And if I can't do it, then I'm gone. I'm going to do it someplace else. And I think that's probably another reason why I've been moving around at different universities. Those of you know now, I'm at the University of Arizona. And I have the unique opportunity to do a lot of what I'm doing, exploring this variation in Hispanic population, which is also going to be really cool, because what I'm finding is that as time goes on, a lot of these boundaries, these genetic boundaries that we think are around these populations, they're breaking down. Folks are mixing with everybody, and if we don't understand ourselves now, we're not going to be able to even understand it. It's going to be much harder to understand it as time moves on, because of all the mixing that's going on. I'm not saying the mixing is good or bad. I'm just saying because of that, we're not going to, it's going to get hard. It's going to be harder and harder to answer some of these questions.
Doctor, I want to say you really inspired me. I was just talking to Ish about it. I don't know if I told you, I told you before that I want to become a geneticist. I don't know if you really, do you remember me on your page, Amir Bey Kamara?
Yes, brother. I follow you too. It's not you don't follow me. I follow you too. So you always have something very insightful and creative, and that's what I really like about all of you brothers. That you guys work hard, and that I had the same level of commitment. I see that, and I'm like, well, there's some brothers that are younger than me that are committed just as I was. I was in a black study group when I was in D.C. in grad school. If it wasn't for this group called Two Emotion, We Are One, we would sit and we'd read Shake Handy Joke's book, we'd read Fitch's book, Van Sertima's books, and we have these discussions every Saturday morning, every single Saturday morning for 4 years. I was a part of that group, and it grounded me. And it also, they were older folk who inspired me, older black folk, and they were younger folk that I'm sure, hopefully I inspired. And so we just got to keep that spirit, those blessings. We get blessed and we keep pass that blessing on. So, but yeah, brother, I definitely know. And I appreciate it. I really appreciate your comment.
I wanted to ask you this, Doc. I know you got on a Native American thing, and I think this is important. Would it be safe to say that the Mexicans, even though you said, they're still trying to figure stuff out, but would it be safe to say that within a Hispanic population or the Hispanic people in the United States, would it be safe to say that the Mexicans have more original Native American affinities than a lot of the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans and other groups? Because I know a lot of their mitochondrial DNA is indigenous to the Americans and some of their autosomal traits. But would it be safe to say that the Mexicans have more of original Native American DNA, not overall, but more than a lot of the other Hispanic groups?
Yes, it is. That's a definite. We can say that definitively. When you look at the profiles in Mexican and other Central American populations, we see a larger proportion of Native American ancestry than compared to Cubans or Dominicans or Puerto Ricans. They have a lot, but not as much. They have a higher proportion, as I said earlier, of African ancestry.
Yes, that's deep.
And I would also say to read the book by James Brooks. It's called Captive Cousins. And in that, you break down a lot of the different families, particularly like around like the Texas and New Mexico area, which really just shows you how one side of the border became Native American, and the other side of the border stayed Mexican. You know what I mean? They were literally cousins, same, sometimes siblings, and one would be capturing the other, or families would be, one would change the name to Sanchez, the other one would stay as Running Water and stuff like that. So that book, Captive Cousins, is a very good book that kind of breaks down a lot of the history. And we should always try to couple the genetic history with linguistics, with cultural history. We should be able to trace that, and then you'll be able to get a much more clear picture of kind of what makes us who we are and what the differences would be also. Always encourage that.
Everybody talk at once. Everybody talk at once. So, Dr. Kittles, what were you saying?
I remember we first started developing these markers for Native American ancestry that were informative for Native American ancestry. And we were testing African Americans who claimed they had, a significant proportion of Native American ancestry. And then when we did the testing, we didn't see that in their genetics, in their gene pool. And so at one point I was getting really discouraged because I thought maybe our markers weren't that good. But then I started typing these Southwestern populations, Mexican Americans, and I saw that those markers were very informative. I mean, upwards of, on average, upwards of like 40 to 60% Native American. I mean, so it was captured in those populations. It just wasn't captured in ours because a lot of the oral histories and what we believe, those old wives' tales, just isn't there. Now, there is a small fraction of Native American ancestry in African Americans, but it's not a lot. And it's not as much as most African Americans claim.
Now, let me say this, Dr. Kittles, is there a difference between the pale, the closer to pale, the one they call red, Native American, and the darker hue Native American? Is there a difference?
I don't know. We don't have enough data to explore that.
Okay, because I noticed that, you know, when we look at the Native American, we have two different variations. we have one that can be as dark olive as the darkest brother you ever seen, and then we can see one that is as light as a European. So
right, well,
you know what?
Mixed just as much. There are very few Native Americans that are 100% Native American. You got to understand that. I mean,
oh, I see.
So there'll be Native Americans whose family has been on those tribal roles for generations, and then when you test them, it'll be like 60 to 80% Native American. There's nobody who's up there with 100, because there's the European, especially European men. They've done some damage across populations around the world. I mean, you see their signatures almost every population around the world. All the way up into Antarctica and the South Pole. And you see the signatures of white men, the genetic signatures of white men.
Yes.
And so I'll tell you a quick story. So I was invited back in 2006. I was 2005. I was at Ohio State. I was faculty at Ohio State doing research on cancer, and the Black freedmen community invited me to come to Oklahoma and do some testing. Now, some of you may remember that the Black freedmen are African American that were part of the so-called 5 civilized tribes: the Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, and Cherokee. Did I say Cherokee twice? But so there's 5 of them, and they were moved out of their lands in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and into reservations, really bad land, really, in Oklahoma. And so they were these descendants that are alive now. They're descendants of folks that were on the rolls back when the Trail of Tears, when they were moved out from their homelands and from Florida to Alabama. That Trail of Tears, those 5 tribes had Black families that were on the rolls. These were Blacks who were either men and women and children who had ancestry from West and Central Africa, right? And in some cases, they actually ate with some of those groups. They had children with them. But for many of those cases, those Blacks that were on those rolls, they had befriended the Native Americans, and they were part of the social sort of construct of those groups, because there was a lot of chaos when they were moved out of their land. And in some cases, those Blacks that were on the rolls actually helped maintain and stabilize those groups through that horrific period. So fast forward to 2005, and I think it was 2004 or 2, the federal government gave those 5 tribes reparations. Each one of them got over $10-20 million. And the Seminoles actually invested it in real estate. And, the Seminole owned the Hard Rock Casino and Hard Rock Cafe. They own all of that property across the world, and so they're in the Fortune 500. And a lot of it is because of money that they got from reparations. Many of the other ones, they built casinos or whatever, but each one of the folks that were on the rolls got some of that money. But one of the things that each one of those tribes did once they got that money was they kicked out all the Blacks that were on the roll. And they said, you have to prove that you're Native American. And so for a decade, they were trying to prove this. Now, this was happening actually before the reparations, but this made matters worse after the reparations. So they actually come to Oklahoma and do some testing. Now, these are folks with Native American names like Dawes, and they had names. These are Black families in Oklahoma with Native American last names. And they're darker in complexion. Some of them actually have some, high cheekbones and some physical features that may resemble Native Americans. But when we did the testing, we didn't find a lot of of Native American ancestry in those communities, the Black freedmen communities. And it was sad at some level, because what it reflected was these guys were socially enrolled in those groups. It wasn't a biological connection for the most part, right? One of the things we found was that they had very low Native American ancestry. Actually, the average Black person in Cincinnati had higher Native American ancestry than the Blacks in Oklahoma that were in the freedmen. So that was striking. That was number one. Number two, those Blacks in Oklahoma had a higher proportion of European ancestry than other African Americans. So what made me think, I started thinking, I said, well, maybe that European genetic ancestry in those African Americans didn't come from whites. Maybe they came through Native Americans. You see what I'm saying? So while there was mixing with whites at some level, there could have been mixing with Native Americans that were already mixed. They were mixed with whites, and that's where those genes came from in African Americans. So that's something that needs to be explored further. But it was sad at some level. They were pretty upset about it. They told me to hurry up and get out of town. So.
I think that's why it's important that you couple what you do that's so important scientifically with what happens culturally as well as historically. I think that's why it's so important to couple it that way, because you're absolutely right. That's one of the things that my expertise is in. I was fortunate enough to be able to work for the Seminoles for the last 3 years until just last June before I moved back to Las Vegas. But by me working with them and knowing the families and knowing how the government operates and knowing the history of the Seminoles, and be able to actually have friends that I consider like family to me that are actual tribal members, I'm able to get a lot of that rich history behind. I know the Bowlegs family and there's certain families, the Seminole families like that. But when you couple it with that and understand that most of these families were already mixed coming from that Southeast region, they were already a mixed population or known to be mixed populations, be it the Seminoles, who are really the Muskogee or the Creeks, and then the Cherokee, already mixed tribes. And so you're right, they're already the cut, and then you're cutting the cut. So by the time they get to Oklahoma, they have legitimate political ties and actually have their own treaties of 1866 and things like that. They had treaties that were showing, okay, you're freedmen and you'll have the rights as citizens of this particular tribe. But now the challenge is to get the government to actually acknowledge those treaties of 1866, because they're actually a miscellaneous people. They don't have the protection of being 13th Amendment or 14th Amendment citizens at all, because the 13th and 14th Amendment were not applied to freedmen. Freedmen had their own agreements with the United States government. So checking the things genetically and coupling it with the cultural and the historical part is so very, very important.
Yep. That's how I was raised. When I was in grad school in DC, I told you my mentors, and they made sure that I looked at things not just from a genetic lens, but to couple that with history, culture, language, and because you get a fuller sort of representation, and it also brings better resolution, because there's so often you got to find things that conflict. But when you look at the history, one of the reasons why the Blacks and Seminoles in Florida were so strongly tied together was because they both were fighting against those whites that were running around killing folk in Florida. Many of the in South Georgia, Southern Georgia, many escaped West and Central African enslaved men would go into Florida in the what do you call that in Florida, the swamps in Florida, and in many cases befriend some of those native.
Right. They live right in the Everglades. They live right amongst all of them. Absolutely.
It's white. For years. The leadership, the political structure in Georgia would pay people to go and try to capture these escaped enslaved African men in Florida, because there was so much chaos going on, and that was sort of the early sort of forming of those alliances and the connections. And actually there was a Black Seminole chief, And so, you know, there is this history. We know about the Buffalo Soldiers and all that stuff. So it's not some weird, you know, lawsuit, but there is a rich history there.
Hey Doc, can I ask you a question? I heard you say something about you in school you dealt with history and linguistics to match up with what you know now. A lot of people in the Black community, we go backwards and forward on, I mean, the so-called, they call it the conscious community. We go backwards and forward on this Afro-Asiatic thing. Some people believe that Afro-Asiatic is not a language family or it's not indigenous to Africa. Do you have anything on Afro-Asiatic, or could you explain the Afro-Asiatic language family, if you can?
Who says it's not African? It is African.
Well, you have people that try to claim that the Egyptians spoke a Niger-Congo language, and they say that the Egyptians spoke Negro Egyptian, and they try to say that the Egyptians didn't speak Afro-Asiatic language. But according to what I look at, the Egyptian language system is similar to Somali, Bija, Afar, and other Afro-Asiatic speakers like Berber. But they want to say that they were a Niger-Congo speaking people. So I want to know if you know anything about. Could you explain how the Afro-Asiatic family work, or, you know, how did it emerge?
I haven't really studied up on that in a while, man. I used to be able to, you know, describe that well. I'm not even gonna play myself right now, so. But I'll tell you, I'll tell you though that's indigenous Africa, and you know, there's some sharing of dialect across, you know, some of those groups or whatever because of migrations and trade and all that stuff. But yeah, no, that's an African. That's African. The Nilo-Saharan too. I mean, so I guess so. Nilo-Saharan. So what do some of the folks think about that?
Some people say that the Sahara, I believe in Afro-Asiatic, they both emerged from the same common gap from the Super-Borinian language stratum.
Oh, you just started to break up a little bit and go.
They try to.
Yeah, he broke up. I think he had a bad connection. So
yeah, most people subscribe to the fact that Kemet or Egypt is a branch of the Nilo-Saharan family.
Congo.
That they're branches of the Lake Chad region and that expansion. So they're a branch of that particular family tree. That's a general consensus.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that we have some interesting examples of things that still need some more reconciliation. So, for instance, we look at the Hausa people or the Fulani people, and look at those Y chromosomes, and they're like J1. And you know, we see those in the Middle East. We see them in East Africa. Remember what I said, you know, Finch used to call that the Northeast African extension. He called that Africa. That was Africa, you know, because of the back and forth. In prehistory, they were going back and forth. So it's very hard to say that one of those is Asian versus African. But, you know, here we have, in some cases, language, definitely a different genetic profile. But these are folk who, I think, you know, this is my feeling, is that those groups, because they're, you know, they're Muslim communities, and I think a lot of that was when the Islamic expansion from East to West Africa, and so I think that's remnant of that, and we see that in those signatures today, in particular in those two groups. They're very distinct. They're very distinct.
So when you're looking at you physically looked at genetic strands before, are you able to trace the migration times? Like, say for instance, when you do have African people that are over here in America, they'll say, well, we've always been here, or we came over on the first migration and Ubuntu came over on a later migration. Are you able to genetically be able to tell, almost like a tree, the age of a tree or the genetics, you know, when you're looking at it physically? Are you able to trace migration patterns on it physically?
Not at that recent amount of time. I mean, we can do it, and we do it, but it's a much older sort of group of migration. So the transatlantic slave trade, right? It would be very difficult to say, well, this person got here yesterday, post the transatlantic slave trade versus, in the middle of it. Because, at some level we can say, based on your genetics, the time since for your family, the time that there was this admixture with white was maybe 4 generations or 7 generations or 14 generations. We can do that at some level based on your genetics. But it's still not going to reflect sort of those migrations, because some of that admixture might have been, there might be people who don't have as much admixture, but it's been around just as long. You see what I'm saying? They just didn't have a white man rape some enslaved African woman in their family. So it's rather hard. It's difficult to actually, show that. But for these old ancient migrations, we can see the changes that occur once these populations, these groups of settlers, go to a different place, and then you have a different profile that emerges. That would be a signature, a time frame, a point on the tree that would reflect a migration.
So what would be the major differences if you're looking at E1B1 and someone is the E1B1A and one's the E1B1B? What are going to be the major differences between that? Because one may be E1B1A may be a little bit north in the Morocco region, where E1B1B may be in Senegal and even going lower than that. So what are going to be the major differences between just that A and that B when you see that genetically?
Brother, I already told you, I really don't like how those haplogroups are designated. I think that
right.
If they had any sense, they would use geography and historians to help them designate those haplogroups. You shouldn't have an E1B and E1B1 separated like that, because it's really just one mutation.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier. They playing games.
That's very responsible. Yes, I understand.
In terms of the actual lineages, they could be vastly, geographically they're vastly different, or maybe they're not as geographically different than what they appear to be. Folks, we got to understand, folks were moving about even before Columbus, and so we have to take that into some account too. And just because you see that, in let's say Morocco or whatever, doesn't mean that it emerged there. But yeah, I think I just have some serious problems with the haplogroup designation. I don't have any problems with the haplogroups, but once they start really tearing apart, well, actually I have a problem with all the haplogroups, because, like I said, we should have a lot more letters in Africa. A lot more of these major haplogroups should be in Africa. There shouldn't be, L1, L2, L3. Each one of those should be 3 different major haplogroups.
Yes, sir.
I'm glad the doc
L0.
I'm glad the doc broke that down, man, because you really can't separate the E's, because E1B1B and E1B1A is both offshoots of EP2. It's all E1B1. So again, they trying to play games. They found this E marker in Greeks at 26%. They found it in people in the Middle East at 33%. They trying to play games and hijack it because it's something that come out of Africa. And yeah, they do play with mitochondrial DNA L. All L's are offshoots of mitochondrial E, which is L0. And she got L1, L2, L3. Then you got the subclade mutations. Then you got L4, L5, L6. But they're all part of that mitochondrial DNA E. I mean, L3 was the one that gave birth, like he said earlier, the doctor said earlier, L3 gave birth to M and N.
Variation,
if she gave birth
just within L1 is almost 600 times the variation of all the European haplogroups combined. But yet we just have one letter, one L1. You see, so
Wow.
I just don't like how they play that. There is enormous variation within L1, L2, L3, and they should be separated further.
That's right.
Yes, yes. Did anyone have any like specific questions? Oh, I know one of the persons in the chat room was asking a question about Sheikh Anta Diop. The studies of Sheikh Anta Diop, has that influenced, or was that influential at all as far as some of the works that you've done before, as far as the work of Sheikh Anta Diop?
I love Diop's work for many reasons. One was, I was like, well, if he can do it, I'm going to try to do stuff like that too. And so it was encouraging. He was a champion. He was brilliant, and he taught some brilliant people and passed it on. So, I mean, all of his books I've read, and I remember Civilization Barber is one of the most difficult books I've ever read in my life, but it was just phenomenal, right? And then even the melanin dosage test, I actually got that translated because it was in French. I got it translated, and it was a big part of my of wanting to focus on really trying to look at the evolution of skin color in African peoples. Of course, I used to always try to imagine myself getting access to some ancient Egyptian DNA or skin or hair samples, so that I would be able to do some of that testing. But it was something that was quite encouraging for me and exciting to think about.
Absolutely. And just for the record, as far as a scientist, what is your definition of a Moor? How do you see a Moor? Like, is it through scientific eyes? Is it from cultural eyes? Is it a mixture of both? How do you see the what a Moor is?
I just look at it in a historical perspective, right? So you have the Moors in Europe, right, and came up from Africa. That's how I look at it. I mean, I haven't done a lot of the, I know that the Moorish science, the temples and all that, but I haven't done a lot of research on that.
Well, let me say something.
I do know that that there was a lot of history that emerged as Moors were in Southern Europe, and it sort of like just changed the dynamic of European civilization.
Well, brother, I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna step back out because I'm learning now myself. But when you say they came up from Africa, again, not for me. Because look, it's so crazy that we have corner store bodega scholars. I don't know if you know, but they're all over the internet. They don't have a PhD. They picked up one book, they put a camera in their face, and they start talking. They even made the Moors, I think they say the Moors are not Africans. They made up a whole bunch of stuff, and people was riding with this stuff. And whether you did deep research or not, you just said the Moors came out of Africa, and everybody should know that. That's common information, But we got these bodega scholars that used to go in and just try to rip the Moors to shreds, and little do they know is that we are one of the same people.
Right.
I'm talking. All right, so we have the genetic experts saying that the Moors come from Africa, and then we have the corner store bodega scholars saying that the Moors are Neanderthals. So I'll go with the geneticist, the African geneticist and expert in the field. I'll roll with that.
I want to say this. I think it's important for people. I think it's important for people to get African Ancestry DNA tests, because he just don't give you haplogroup. He gives you the genetic marker. He gives you the 4 nucleotide codes DNA too. He explains DNA story of where you come from. Small snip that makes up point. He gives you the detailed story of your mitochondrial, and he gives you the complete detailed story of your paternal lineage, and he gives you the autosomal in between. So I think that people should support AfricanAncestryDNA.com. It's powerful.
Yes, sir.
And I want to concur with that. I want to back up and Ngozi with that. It was very influential with me being able to find my Akan background from a maternal line, also my Balanta and Guinea-Bissau line from my father's line. I was able to also get a mixture of both, and that was through the company of AfricanAncestry.com. Able to couple it with other companies also, but AfricanAncestry.com is definitely a company that we should support. Make sure that we support our own. And this is somewhere where once there's some companies you know, that may be working in conjunction with other entities that we don't know about, third parties. You know, with African Ancestry, we have a direct connection with a brother and a sister who's been committed to us. So let's make sure we support them. And maybe they're even doing a special that's going to be going on for Black Friday. I don't know. But I do know that the price is really reasonable, and what you're getting is priceless. You cannot put a price on what your family lineage, even if it's just a small part. We're not trying to say that it's going to give you the total picture, but it's going to give you a very small snippet of something that's factual and something that you can use to say, man, this is where I come from. This is a part of who I am as a human being. That is absolutely priceless. So make sure you support African Ancestry, please.
Absolutely, and I second that. I'm definitely going to support them. I'm going to call the brother personally. Now I'm gonna tell you something. I'm a little bit nervous because I got a little slender nose. You know, I know that European been playing some games. You see, yeah, I know that old European been playing some games, but I gotta know what my bloodline connects to Africa is all about. I ain't worried about that European. He didn't play games with a lot of us. Don't worry about that.
You might be Somali, brother. See, we gotta go deeper on that one day, brother Tahaka.
Hey,
one day we're gonna go deeper into that.
Hey, Tahaka.
Yes, sir.
Tahaka.
Give me some hope, brother. Give me some hope.
Hey, just don't be that 30% of the African American man with the Y chromosome. Get your mitochondrial DNA test. That'd be more important. The mitochondria. The mitochondria stands out way more.
Yeah, y'all give me some hope, man. Cause I'm gonna be honest. I don't want that European up in me like it. I don't feel like it. I feel like one of them. I feel like one of them Moors that went up in Spain. I feel like one of the ones that was on the elephant going through the elf. I'm not the super scholar Moor. I'm the one that was on the front line saying, man, come on, we got to get them out the way so we can build something. That was me. Right. That was me. But this was a beautiful dialogue. Brother, anybody else? Come on, brother. Come on in, man. Talk to the good doctor real quick before we close out. We got 10 minutes.
Hey, Doc, before you close out, I want to ask you, what do you feel about the Neanderthal and a lot of the people having human leukoantigens or their immunities, the immunity response like them? What do you feel about Neanderthal? Do you feel that we know that it causes a lot of havoc to some humans, especially Europeans and some African Americans that got traits? But what do you feel about the Neanderthal and the discovery of what they're doing with these Neanderthal gene variants that they're finding?
The Neanderthal genetics also was one of those where they did this subtraction method of the genome by looking at modern humans and seeing that there was something that wasn't found in other modern human populations, and then trying to compare that with the archaic sequences that they were able to get. I never really got excited about the Neanderthal stuff. Some folk really like to know that they have some archaic DNA. But you know, it's very small fraction, and obviously there was interbreeding across from Neanderthals and modern humans. So we should be able to see it, and it's there. But I don't get excited about it. I think it's also interesting that those two groups of Neanderthals that they found that they have sequence from, and then there's so you have these modern humans in different geographic regions that at some level are interbreeding with Neanderthals, but then it's like, well, the Africans weren't interbreeding with the archaic or whatever, and so it'll be interesting to see if anything emerges, like the downstream in terms of some African archaic DNA that just hasn't been identified yet.
Oh man, hey, Dr. Skittles, I want to thank you, brother. This is a beautiful show, bro. I wish we could go on and on because you're a talker like me. See, but let me tell you something. When a PhD talk out of my community, I know when to be quiet. I know when to shut my mouth. And brother, this was a jewel. And I want to ask you, brother, in the future, near future, can we do updates on the development of DNA with you, brother, coming on the show every once in a while, even if it's like next month or the month, whatever you're available, brother?
Yes. Let's do that because I really appreciate you brothers, and I've been checking you guys out, and I think you guys are committed and you're working hard. So yeah, I would love to participate every now and then, and next time I'll do it on video.
Yes.
I wasn't prepared today though. So, but yeah, definitely. Let's do another another session.
Because this is the thing, brother. As I said, in the YouTube world, we deal with a lot of corner store, bodega, storefront scholarship, and that these guys are not qualified to even teach a class on the subject matter. My brother Sharif always say, and he'll tell you 1,000,001 times. He said it in a debate, the classical debate. He looked at the brother on the other side and said, "You don't know enough about the topic to debate it." And that's what we're dealing with in our communities now. And a lot of people don't even know enough about the topic, and they be speaking on it sounding crazy.
Right.
Yeah, so I can appreciate your scholarship, brother. I definitely. Any closing questions on the panel? Come on, brothers, do something hot. Make the brother say something.
Man, I thank the doc for coming on. Doc, I thank you for making this happen. I thank you for allowing the doc. I've been trying to communicate with the doc for a minute, and Tucker, I thank you. And Doc, thanks for coming on, man. Just coming to get some light to the community. I really appreciate this. This is powerful.
Yes, sir.
Well, listen, this brother Sharif. I ain't said nothing. I just been writing, taking notes. This was a powerful show, very, very, very powerful. And like the brother Talk of Bay said, I know how to get the coin out the fish's mouth, man. So I took notes. there was a lot of jewels, and a lot of it, as I'm sure my brother Talk of Bay will confirm, and brother Ishmael Bay will confirm, or that will back up. A lot of what you said from the genetic side of things, resonates with us, especially some of the difficulties you face dealing with the status quo, and them trying to limit or impede your progress or the dissemination of the information based on your progress, like what I recognize is the philosophy that was born out of the Hamitic hypothesis. In other words, trying to explain how, people that look like us in ancient time developed high civilization. So I appreciate your work, brother, and I'm definitely gonna follow you more, or follow you actually, and I'm gonna patronize the business. I did a genetic test with what was it, Ancestry.com. Yeah, I feel like I need my money back. So with that, I'm gonna say peace.
And with that said, I want to say this in closing. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out, honor to my brother Ishmael Bay, who made all of this possible. He reached out to me, and we just made it happen. Ishmael Bay, that brother, he steps to the front line and makes things happen, and I'm glad he reached out to me for this topic right here, and I hope he brings some more to the table. So Ishmael Bay is due definitely honor for bringing this topic to the forefront. I love it, and I think we need to do plenty more like that. Y'all with me, family?
Yeah, man. Yeah, appreciate you, Ish, man. That's big, man. That's power right there, yo. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. For Dr. Kittles to take the time, I'm very humbled that Dr. Kittles would take the time, and I thank him for his commitment. He's blazing a trail, and it's no less important than the important works of what Sheikh Anta Diop did. And I see a university that is named after Sheikh Anta Diop, and one of the brothers who assists me in some of my research is a graduate. He's a professor there. And I also think that Dr. Kittles, his work is just as trailblazing in the works of what he does as far as his commitment is no less important. So I salute brothers like Dr. Kittles, the work that Dr. Wesley Muhammad does in Islam and his influence of tying Islam to African science as well. These are brothers that I hold in very high regard scholastically and as men. So for them to take the time and to honor their brother Ishmael to even come and take the time to address us and to teach us, I'm always humbled by that. Allah has made and shaped me in certain ways to have good relationships with very good people. So I thank them for teaching me and for them to share and espouse their knowledge and information to all of us. So I thank each and every one of y'all.
That's what's up, my brother. Anybody, anything final closing, Dr. Kittles? We already agreed you're coming back, so you can't get out of that one. So come on with something else.
No, but I'll definitely look forward to talking with you guys again, man. Like I said, I follow you guys, and I just love to see brothers working hard, trying to seek and share the truth. So mad respect and one love to each and every one of y'all, man. So,
and next time,
the comments.
hey brother, and next time you come on here, you're gonna bring some beats on here so I can spit some bars. Cause I can spit some bars, brother. I don't know if how much you've been watching me, but tune in to Moorish World TV and you'll see me spit some bars one of these days.
All right.
All right, my brother, peace and love. So family, there you have it. We have a certified PhD on Moorish World TV. There you have it. Thank you, Brother Ish. Thank you, Ngozi. Who else there? Who else? Everybody. You know, this is a beautiful thing, man, when we can sit and we can talk and get real work done. You know, I was looking at the chat. Everybody in the chat have benefited from this dialogue or this diatribe, however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. Because I look at what's going on the internet as it relates to YouTube, and I see that most people are being entertained, and they have been entertained so much that now they try to get into something serious and critical, and the people are still looking for entertainment. The good thing is that we have an intelligent audience for real and not looking for entertainment, but I'm gonna give them some anyway. But the main narrative of Moorish World TV is to lift your intelligence, raise your intelligence, so you can know who you are and know the potential that you possess within yourself. And with that, in closing, thanks again, my family, and I'm gonna see y'all on the other side. Brother Ngozi, I got to tell you, my brother, I got to bring you on here so I can rip you apart with some questions so you can just go and run with it. So you up next, my brother. You got me?
Islam. I'm with it, brother. Islam. Yes, sir.
Because, brother, I'm trying to tell you, there's nothing like. See, this is why me and Sharif get along. This is why me and you will get along, and this is why me and Ishmael get along, and now me and Dr. Kittles get along. Because they can out-talk me. Because y'all can out-talk me.
Brother Ngozi, you from the Shy, right?
Yeah, I'm out here in Chicago. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Where in the Shy? You on the South?
I'm on the west side, and I'm well versed with Brother King Bay. I seen y'all out there on the south side. I'm out west though.
Yes, sir. Nah, Mo, you sound like you know something about that pyramid. That's all.
Yeah, I'm from Moorish side, Simple number 9 on Horn in Augusta.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
I King Bay was there. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, anyway, y'all brothers can talk, and I love it. Because I don't like talking all the time. I like talking. But with that, I said peace and love, family. Islam, I see y'all on the other side. And Ngozi, I'll be reaching out to you soon. And we're going to do this Islam. One more again. All right?
No doubt.
Hey, peace to you, brother Ish. I really appreciate that. Peace and love.
Yeah, appreciate it, brother Ish. Appreciate it, bro.
And who's my brother right here again?
Peace and love, family.
Love y'all, family. Peace. I'm out.
Peace.
New day for the Moors.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Hey, you already know. You already know. It's a new day for the Moors, my brother. That's how we're going to take it out. Just like it. But first, we're going to drop a bomb. Then we're going to drop a bomb for the family. We're going to drop a bomb. And then, hey, Ish.
Yes, sir.
Did you get a chance? Did you get a chance to really listen to that? Oh, I know what I gotta do. Yeah, we're gonna let the bomb drop. Let the bomb drop. Cause I want to try this one. Cause this is the joint. This is the video being shot this week. Let the bomb drop. Hold up. Here we go. That's right. This how y'all show did tonight. Moorish World took over. That's right.
Yes, sir.
So here we go. Here we go. You hear this one, Ish? Islam.
Oh, yes.
It's that mortar.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All praise.
All praise.
Be to the great God Allah
Sure.
and his noble prophet. Drew Ali. Let's go. This for my people. Yeah. That's the new one. No matter what you believe.
That's right.
This one for you. And you. And you. Hey. Yeah. Moorish World. Let's get it.
Give it to us.
That's the video. Here we go again, misleading the youth, claiming that some fat European is landing on the roof. We gotta stay at 12 range as we float in the sky. Whoever made up this one, they had to be high. We teach the kids to believe and tell them never to deceive. And if they do, they won't receive nothing under the tree. We lie and tell them don't. Fill their mind with this junk and wonder why they confused and treat us like punks. We spend our hard-earned money on Xbox and PS. Then we give the honor to some BS. We stress on January 1 when New Year comes. Waiting on a tax refund. Feeling like bums. Yeah, we deck that hall and we like that tree. Like the entire crib, just PG&E. But when the bill comes, we feel dumb. We tight, let's be real. What all it's got to do with Christ? Come on. Oh yeah, we get somebody mad with this one. If the truth got you mad, but if you mad, if the truth got you mad, do something, do something. That's what this one called. If you mad, do something. It's a shame that we've been taught to justify a lie to say you got a plan that the minds gave us this religion, fairy tales and superstition. Tell me where it was written. In the honor of Jesus, we should put up a tree. But I can show you it was paganistic back in BC. In the Bible book of Jeremiah, chapter 10, verse 2 to 5 will explain this sin. See, corruption is corruption, no matter how you twist it. Commercialize the birth of your Savior is ridiculous, sad, upset, and mad, and feeling real bad when you can't buy the little one the new iPad. Try buying him a Bible or Quran or the stores. You bought them J's, I know you can afford it. Break that cycle, take down them lights, yeah, burn that tree. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. Come on. Yeah. If the truth got you mad, if the truth got you mad, do something. Do something. If the truth got you mad, if the truth got you mad, do something. Do something. I never thought of that. This is for my people. It's for my people, baby. If the truth got you mad, do something. Do something.
At least one beats get 3 beats.
There you go. There you go. I'm gonna spit some bars. Let's not do that. I ain't gonna spit no bars. I know her. I'm about to spit some bars. There we go. I was gonna spit some bars, but I told her. Let's do this. Let's ride out with this. I'm gonna get something to eat.
Time
there
to
we
check
go.
some people.
Let's go to family.
To Harker Bay.
Man, this be coming from my heart.
I guess I gotta do
I don't write this so you can like it.
what I gotta do.
I write it because it is what it is. You know what I mean?
We for love, truth, peace, and freedom.
You know what else? Check it out.
Won't nobody do it, leave it to me, I will. You lanes, you gotta chill, you so not real. I've been watching you fake snakes, acting different, cause you don't live in the hood and don't get public assistance. Man, my people be tripping when they think they better. All type of degrees, still dumber than ever. So corrupt and foul, but they know how to hide, they polish their life. They look good on the outside, before the veil back and I expose them all. They be tricking worse than them shorties up in the mall. Getting high as a kite, beating they wife, they got a mistress, they got another look down on you. The brothers is cursed, see the worst than the no not. We know who you are, but all the heck you do is throw shots. We see what you got. Okay, you made it through school. Okay, you okay. Little homie, that's cool. That's cool. You know what I mean? So, you done came up with your little education. Now you want to look down on me and my people? We'll keep on looking down.
What's up, War Ready? Sister Dom, Sister Love Star Nelson.
Let's go. I'm sick and tired of these lame old frauds. Keep picking up the mic device, acting so hard. I've been through that fire, the type of things you never heard of. Little lanes like you will commit self-murder. You acting like life's so sweet over a beat. In the street without your heat, you clowns is weak. In the spot, in the box, you straight mince meat. Them tattoo tears make you look like a geek. Little sideshow freak, acting like they cheat, acting like they me, or who I used to be, but they all be embellishing. No weapon intelligence, taking care of your seeds, irrelevant, and pressing up shorties, cause she got a little shape. But her nail and her weave, her whole style is fake. How can she be a dime, her brain flat line? Her birth canal is probably foul as swine. Yeah. It is what it is. Got a few bars. Somebody put you on. Now you act like you hard. That's right. You ain't hard. You ain't hard. We got back out. Straight bluff. Exactly. That's right. You getting at you. Check it out. Let's go. I'm trying to tell you all, just wake up. How many lives will we destroy to get caked up? How much time will it take us to even the score? How many dope feed babies on the NICU floor? How many queens gotta turn into crackhead whores before we understand our savior is just to be born? We got our eyes to the sky, the solution is in us. God put that with us. We born winners. We choose to be sinners. I pray Allah forgive us and forgive me for the way that I choose to deliver. But my message is the same as the Moorish Quran, but I say it in a way that certain people will respond. So they will talk, ridicule, and judge me. You don't sit around and watch things get ugly when it all fall apart. The people you look down on, they be the only one that you can count on. It ain't look like your mother, father, sister, or friend. We need to realize we all we got in the end. Ain't nobody coming to your rescue but you. Instead of running your mouth, won't you see what you can do? Your life is only worth what you sacrifice. And black people, stop being so trifling. Asiatics, stop being so trifling. Come on, people, stop being so trifling. Time for us to come up. We gotta stop playing, man. More steps to the front. Stop acting like you bougie.